In an old cafe on the corner of a quiet street, the story of Anna unfolds, a young waitress whose life was forever changed after a tragic encounter with three men. Now, as a ghost, she roams the walls of the cafe, thirsting for revenge. Her shadow is felt by every visitor, and those who wronged her are doomed to face her wrath. But what happens when her tormentors return to the cafe, and Anna decides her time has come? The shadow in the old cafe, a vengeance that knows no rest. Anna worked as a waitress in a small cafe on the corner of an old street. It was an unremarkable place, frequented mostly by locals, three men who couldn't spend an evening without a couple of drinks. They came in and sat at the same table, always in the corner, where they could conveniently observe everyone else. There was always something strange in their eyes, a mix of boredom and vanity, and perhaps a bit of self-respect for the fact that their money, though modest, could buy attention. Anna was young and beautiful, and she couldn't go unnoticed. She tried to ignore their looks, which were far from innocent. But every day, every evening, it became harder and harder. On the evening when everything changed, the air was misty, and the cafe felt especially empty, despite the presence of those three men. They sat at their table, as usual, chatting, but their conversation was tinged with disrespect. As Anna made her rounds, she noticed one of them seemed a little off, his hands trembling as he poured himself another drink. She decided to ignore it, but this evening was unlike the others. Something inside her stirred when she once again felt their eyes, not just watching her, but probing her for weakness. She tried to push the thought away, hiding behind the counter. But the darkness in one of the men's eyes was so clear that Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She didn't remember exactly how it happened. Only that when she left the kitchen to bring them more drinks, one of them grabbed her wrist. The others quickly got up, and she realized she had no choice. Her heart froze. She tried to resist, but every step she took was absorbed by their eager hands. They were strong, and she was weak, weaker than she had ever been. It's hard to speak about what happened next, but after that night, Anna was no longer the person she once was. Her body was scarred, but her soul, even more so. The bodies of those men disappeared, but her soul remained tethered to this place. She couldn't leave, couldn't abandon it, couldn't forget. In the dead of night, when the cafe was empty again and the light flickered faintly in the windows, she began to walk its walls. Those who entered felt a chill. Sometimes, someone would mention hearing soft footsteps or sensing someone's breath behind them when no one else was around. But when they turned around, no one was there. Shadows slithered through the hall like an invisible presence, watching every movement. As time went on, her hatred grew stronger, and her thirst for vengeance became more intricate. She felt that her pain was not only a bond, but an unyielding desire for justice, even if no one could hear it. Gradually, her presence became more tangible. The shadow that wandered through the room was felt by everyone who entered the cafe, but no one could explain what was happening. Sometimes, when someone sat in the corner, strange things would begin to happen to them. Tables would shift, chairs would creak, and the light in the lamps would flicker. At first, people attributed this to old equipment or forgotten repairs, but at the moment when the cold began to freeze their bodies, and their gaze seemed to be drawn into nothingness, they started to realize that something was not right. Something was watching them. At first, Anna simply observed. She watched as visitors didn't notice her presence, as the cafe owner locked the doors and turned off the lights day after day. But she couldn't just stand by while her hatred filled her up. And then, one evening, when the three men, once her tormentors, returned, everything changed. They didn't come with their usual crowd, as they always did. They were alone, miserable, and a little lost. It seemed like an ordinary evening, but not for Anna. This was her moment of revenge. She watched them from behind the old curtain in the corner, her body invisible to them, but she could feel them involuntarily listening to every sound, the tension in their shoulders increasing. Anna knew they didn't come here by accident. One of them was drunk, the others silent. In their eyes, there was no longer that disdainful gleam they had once had for her in the days when everything seemed in control. Now, they felt it, they had lost something. They couldn't understand what it was, but they sensed the cold, as if someone was watching them. When one of them stood up to go to the restroom, the door that should have opened normally suddenly didn't give way. He pushed it again and again, but it remained closed, as if someone was standing behind it. A wave of fear swept over him, and he turned to his companions in terror, but they couldn't move. All they saw was the dim flickering light and some strange figure in the darkness. That was when Anna decided her time had come. As soon as they sat back at the table, Anna spoke. These weren't words, but something deeper. A faint scrape of the tables, a cold wind seeping through the cracks of the old windows, and the smell of burning, all of this filled the cafe. The men felt a growing unease. One of them, the more sober of the three, noticed movement in the corner, where no one usually sat. He stood up, but instead of turning toward his friend, he saw his drink suddenly roll off the edge of the table and spill. "What's this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. But the answer lay only in his heart, which began to race. Anna took her time. She felt her strength growing, her soul filling with the desire to reclaim what had been taken. She moved through this world in her own way, leaving no trace, but sending signals. With every movement they made, she overwhelmed them with fear, with each breath, devouring their confidence. And then, when one of them stood up to go to the restroom, Anna allowed herself a second move. The man pushed the door, but it suddenly crashed open, and he barely caught himself from falling. He looked up and froze, seeing an old, worn portrait on the wall that had once seemed plain and unremarkable. But now, there was blood on it. Or was it just his imagination? "You can't leave," his eyes filled with panic, and he realized he was powerless to escape this place. Anna was walking through the dark corners of his mind. She was getting closer, and her revenge was becoming palpable. The men tried to leave, but their bodies wouldn't obey. The walls seemed to close in on them. Before they could understand what was happening, they were trapped. Anna surrounded them with things that couldn't be explained, their fear, their pain, and their past. And at the moment when they realized that this wasn't just a coincidence, that they weren't just in an empty cafe, they screamed. But their screams had no strength. Anna didn't allow them to leave empty-handed. She waited for the moment when their hearts were filled with terror and realization. "You can't leave," her voice rang out, invisible, yet piercing through their souls. When they finally managed to stand up and leave, they knew they would never forget this moment. Anna had taken them inside herself, and their suffering became part of her revenge. The shadow that roamed through this place would never leave it, just as she had never left this world. All that remained was the cold they couldn't escape. Everyone who entered that cafe would feel her presence. Anyone who, by accident or on purpose, forgot her pain would be doomed to the feeling of fear that would always be nearby, like a ghost that wouldn't let go. Anna had finally found peace, but her vengeance, her spirit, remained alive, wandering the walls of the cafe, reminding everyone who had wronged her that evil doesn't go unpunished.